Kid Downers. It's Mrs. Smith and Crosby again. And we have another story to share with you. And it goes along with E Day. So, and it's called Enemy Pie. So, enemy starts with an E. So, enemies kind of make me sad. And my question to you is, do we really need enemies? So, an enemy is somebody that you don't like, or you had a fight with, or somebody that you just consistently kind of all the time don't get along with. And we're going to read this book and see what you think. Do you really think we need enemies? Okay, so here it goes. It should have been a perfect summer. My dad helped me build a treehouse in our backyard. My sister was at camp for 3 whole weeks, and I was on the best baseball team in town. It should have been a perfect summer, but it wasn't. It was all good until Jeremy Ross moved into the neighborhood right next door to my best friend, Stanley. I did not like Jeremy Ross. He laughed at me when he struck me out in a baseball game. He had a party on his trampoline and I wasn't even invited, but my best friend Stanley was. Jeremy Ross was the one and only person on my enemy list. I never had an enemy list until he moved into the neighborhood, but as soon as he came along, I needed one. I hung it up in my treehouse where Jeremy Ross was not allowed to go. Dad understood stuff like enemies. He told me that when he was my age, he had enemies too, but he knew of a way to get rid of them. I asked him to tell me how. Tell you how? Well, I will show you how, he said. He pulled a really old recipe book off the kitchen shelf. Inside there was a worn out scrap of paper with faded writing. Dad had held it up and squinted at it. Enemy pie, he said, satisfied. Oh no, I make a pie for this guy? You may be wondering what exactly is in enemy pie. I was wondering too. But Dad said the recipe was so secret he couldn't even tell me. I decided it must be magic, and I begged him to tell me something, anything. I will tell you this, he said. Enemy pie is the fastest known way to get rid of enemies. Now, of course, this got my mind working. What kinds of things? Disgusting things? Would I put into a pie for an enemy? I brought Dad some weeds from the garden, but he just shook his head. I brought him earthworms and rocks, but he didn't think he'd need those. I gave him the gum I'd been chewing on all morning, and he gave it right back to me. I wonder what's in any enemy pie then. I went out to play alone. I shot baskets until the ball got stuck on the roof. I threw a boomerang that never came back to me, and all the while I listened to the sounds of my dad chopping and stirring and blending the ingredients of enemy pie. This could be a great summer after all. Enemy pie was going to be awful. I tried to imagine how horrible it must smell, or worse yet, what it would look like. But when I was in the backyard looking for ladybugs, I smelled something really, really good. And as far as I could tell, it was coming from our kitchen. I was a bit confused. I went to ask Dad what was wrong. Enemy pie shouldn't smell this good. But Dad was smart. If enemy pie smelled bad, your enemy would never want to eat it, he said. I could tell he'd made enemy pie before. The buzzer rang and Dad put on the oven mitts and pulled the pie out of the oven. It looked like plain old pie. It looked good enough to eat. I was catching on. But still, I wasn't really sure how this enemy pie worked. What exactly did it do to your enemies? Maybe it made their hair fall out, or their breath stinky, or maybe it made bullies cry. I asked Dad, but he was no help. He wouldn't tell me a thing. But while the pie cooled, he filled me in on my job. I wonder what do you think his job might be. do you think, Crosby? I don't know. Let's see. He talked quietly. There is one part of enemy pie that I can't do. In order for it to work, you need to spend a day with your enemy. Even worse, you have to be nice to him. It's not easy, but that's the only way the enemy pie can work. Are you sure you want to go through with this? Sounds interesting. Of course I was. It sounded horrible. It was scary. But it was worth a try. All I had to do was spend one day with Jeremy Ross. Then he'd be out of my hair for the rest of my life. I rode my bike to his house and knocked on the door. When Jeremy opened the door, he seemed surprised. He stood on the other side of the screen door and looked at me, waiting for me to say something. I was nervous. Can you play? I asked. He looked confused. I'll go ask my mom, he said. He came back with his shoes in his hand. His mom walked around the corner to say hello. You boys stay out of trouble, she said, smiling. What? He's got to play with his enemy? We rode bikes for a while and played on the trampoline. Then we made some water balloons and threw them at the neighbor girls, but we missed. Jeremy's mom made us lunch, and after lunch, we went over to my house. It was strange, but I kind of was having fun with my enemy. He almost seemed nice, but of course I couldn't tell Dad that since he had worked so hard to make this enemy pie. Do you see what's happening? It looks like he might be gaining a friend, right, and losing an enemy. Jeremy Ross liked my basketball hoop. He said he wished he had a basketball hoop, but they didn't have room for one. I let him win a game just to be nice. Jeremy Ross knew how to throw a boomerang. He threw it and it actually came right back to him. I threw it and it went over my house and into the backyard. When we climbed over the fence to find it, the first thing Jeremy noticed was my treehouse. Oh, there's another fun thing for them to do. But what's in the treehouse? You guys remember? That list. My treehouse was my treehouse. I was the boss. If my sister wanted in, I didn't have to let her. If my dad wanted in, I didn't have to let him. And if Jeremy wanted in, can we go in it? He asked. Oh my gosh, of course. I knew he was going to ask me that, but he was the top person, the only person on my, you guys remember? Enemy list. And enemies aren't allowed in my treehouse. But he did teach me how to throw a boomerang, and he did have me over for lunch. And he did let me play on his trampoline. He was not being a very good enemy. Okay, I said, but hold on. I climbed up ahead of him and tore the enemy list off the wall. I had a checkerboard and some cars in the treehouse, and we played games until my dad called us down for dinner. We pretended we didn't hear him, and when he came out to get us, we tried to hide from him, but somehow he found us. Dad made us macaroni and cheese for dinner, my favorite. It was Jeremy's favorite too. Maybe Jeremy Ross wasn't so bad after all. I was beginning to think that maybe we could just forget about the enemy pie. But sure enough, after dinner, Dad brought out the pie. I watched as he cut the pie into 8 thick slices. Dad, I said, it sure is nice having a new friend in the neighborhood. Oh, he was trying to get his dad's attention. I was trying to get his attention and trying to tell him that Jeremy Ross was no longer my enemy, but Dad only smiled and nodded. I think he thought I was just pretending. Oh my gosh, he must be so nervous. Dad dished up 3 plates side by side with big pieces of pie and giant scoops of ice cream. Oh my gosh, that sounds so good. He passed one to me and one to Jeremy. Wow, Jeremy said, looking at the pie. My dad never makes pie like this. It was at this point that I panicked. I didn't want Jeremy to eat enemy pie. He was my friend. I couldn't let him eat it. Jeremy, don't eat it. It's bad pie. I think it's poisonous or something. Jeremy's fork stopped before reaching his mouth. He crumbled his eyebrows and looked at me funny. Oh, I felt relieved. I had saved his life. I was a hero. If it's so bad, Jeremy asked, then why's your dad already eaten half of it? Look at his dad. Now wait a minute. If it was poisonous, would his dad be eating it? I think somebody got tricked here, and I think you know who. I think it was my friend here, right? I turned to look at my dad, and sure enough, he was eating enemy pie. Good stuff, he mumbled through a mouthful. And that was all he said. I sat there watching them eat enemy pie for a few seconds. Dad was laughing. Jeremy was happily eating, and neither of them was losing any hair. It seemed safe enough, so I took a tiny taste. Enemy pie was delicious. After dessert, Jeremy rode his bike home, but not before inviting me over to play on his trampoline in the morning. He said he'd teach me how to flip. As for enemy pie, I still don't know how to make it. And I still wonder if enemies really do hate it, or if their hair falls out, or their breath turns bad. But I do know if I ever get an answer, if I'll ever get an answer, because I just lost my best enemy. Interesting, right? So I think you could see that Dad knew that if he just spent some time with Jeremy and got to know him and was curious about Jeremy. So you know how we say we try to do the 3 B's, right? Be curious and be kind and be you. Being curious doesn't just mean doing science experiments or trying to learn something new. It's about being curious about other people, about their feelings, and about a situation. So by being curious about, whether he would play with him and what things he likes to do, he found out that he wasn't a bad guy at all. He was just a little jealous that Jeremy liked his friend Stanley. And that doesn't mean he can't be his friend. Jeremy doesn't have to be his enemy, right? So that kind of answers our question, right? We really don't have to have any enemies, right? People make bad choices, but it doesn't mean that they're bad people. And if you're being kind to people, if you're being curious and learning about other people and also about yourself, how you can be curious about how you're feeling, right? And then just by being you, you don't have to have enemies, right? If there's people that are not very nice to you, that's their problem, and you don't have to worry about them, and you don't have to hurry or you don't have to hang out with them. But that doesn't mean that they're your enemy, right? We can be friends with everybody, and everybody makes mistakes, right? So I encourage you, and I apologize, I don't have much paper here at the lake, so I was doing it on my whiteboard. So I think what you should do is get a piece of paper, and you could either cut out pieces, or you could use markers and make up a friendship pie. So what do you think would go in a friendship pie? What makes a good friendship? So for me, I was thinking, and you could draw pictures or you could put words in there if you wanted to, but I'm going to put a heart because I think just being, loving somebody is being a good friend. And how about saying, here, I'm going to make a little bubble, a little speech bubble. So how about this, saying, do you want to play? Right? So using your words and asking people to play and being kind to them. How about toys, maybe sharing your toys. So maybe I'll just put a Lego in here. So sharing my Legos, that's a way I can be a good friend. Or somebody can be a good friend to me if they're sharing with me. So make a picture of your own friendship pie. Or even better yet, you know what you could do is make a pie with somebody in your house too. That would be a good idea too. Make a pie. Yum, yum. All right, friends. That's another episode. I'll see you later. Be curious, be kind, be you.